皆さんこんにちは。In this video, we are going to check conjugation of group 2 and 3 verbs. If you don't know what group 2 and 3 verbs, check this video and also I'll tell you how to classify Japanese verb. At first, listen to the dialogue and guess what Alex is doing.
お兄さん、このお菓子食べてみて。
ありがとうございます。ああ、桜の味がします。
よくわかりましたね。
実は桜のお菓子を探しに来たんです。
では、ここに来て正解でしたね。よかったらこれも試食してください。
ありがとうございます。
Do you find where Alex is now? Let's listen again with Japanese sentence.
お兄さん、このお菓子食べてみて。
ありがとうございます。ああ、桜の味がします。
よくわかりましたね。
実は桜のお菓子を探しに来たんです。
では、ここに来て正解でしたね。よかったらこれも試食してください。
ありがとうございます。
Let's check new vocabulary to get understood this conversation. Onisan literally means big brother, but we sometimes use as like hey you for young age. 食べてみる is verb eat and see. So it's like try to eat, have a eat, something like this. This 見る is verb watch, look or see, but here this work as auxiliary verb. We are going to check more about auxiliary verb in few weeks, so let's ignore now. 味 is taste. 実は it's actually, but we have many ways to use this, like in fact, to be honest and etc. 探す is search or looking for.
では、it's worth speaking, like well.
試食 is 熟語. In kanji, we write like this. First kanji means try and next one is eat. 試食する is 熟語 plus する to make it verb. This pattern is quite a lot. I can't tell all of you, but most of all 熟語 could possible to use this way. ください is very important auxiliary verb, and this means please. I actually thought I've already thought this because it's so useful. For example, if you want something, you can just say like これください. Next, grammar. Last lesson, we checked group 1 verb. We're gonna check group 2 and 3 this lesson. Group 1 changing part is using all vowel sounds, but group 2 is same vowel sound. No change, but I just want you to be careful about here. It's different from group 1, so be careful when you memorize. Group 3 is no pattern, but only 2 you need to memorize. It's quite easy than other language, I guess. And group 3 as well, the form also different from group 1, but same as group 2, so please be careful. About 10 verbs. Group 2 is 食べる and 見る, and group 3 is する and 来る. Let's see group 2 verbs. There are no changing part like group 1, so basically it's not that difficult. You only need to remember how to connect as form. Group 3 is very difficult. No pattern, so just memorize themselves. Also, 熟語 plus する is this pattern, but as you can see, the pattern of conjugation is same as する, so just remember する. 来る is different from する pattern, but this verb conjugation is only for 来る. Well, how to classify them? As native, we don't even think about this, because we use a lot without any problem, but I know it's difficult for learners. Let's think by 2 steps. At first, group 3 verbs are limited. It's する、来る, and noun plus suru verbs. After this, we also have lots of ways, but I gotta tell famous 2 ways of classifying. First way is thinking about mass form. We use mass form quite a lot, so you should remember mass form of verb. Then when you look about last part of changing verb, if it's I sound, E sound, it's group 1. And if it's E sound, E sound, it's group 2. But we have lots of exceptions actually. Mostly not using like daily life, but miru, okiru, and iru are exception of this pattern, and we often use. Okiru is wake up, and iru is like there is. When we see mass form, it's all I sound, E sound, but it's all group 2. If you think it's too complicated, next one is easier. Let's think about night form. When you look about last part of changing verb, if it's A sound, A sound, it's group 1. If it's I sound or E sound, E or E sound, it's group 2. This doesn't have exception actually, but problem is we don't use quite often like mass form. Now you can understand today's dialogue, so let's listen again with English translation.
お兄さん、このお菓子食べてみて。
ありがとうございます。ああ、桜の味がします。
よくわかりましたね。
実は桜のお菓子を探しに来たんです。
では、ここに来て正解でしたね。よかったらこれも試食してください。
ありがとうございます。
Let's listen again with quick check.
お兄さん、このお菓子食べてみて。
ありがとうございます。ああ、桜の味がします。
よくわかりましたね。
実は桜のお菓子を探しに来たんです。
では、ここに来て正解でしたね。よかったらこれも試食してください。
ありがとうございます。
Probably this is just the start of difficult part of Japanese, but hope you can understand later. In addition, let's check the group of verbs we've already learned. We check verb from group 2 and words from kanji series. Without 10 useful verbs and verbs we checked last video, these are the groups. But I want you to be careful about aru. It's group 1, but they don't have night form because night is opposite of aru. And no equal form as well. So the conjugation is like night, あります、ある、あれば、あって。
お疲れ様でした。よろしければ他の動画もご覧ください。Please check other videos. またお会いしましょう。